as we talk about, oh, that is not connected. Let's try this again. Now we're working. Louis XIV. I say on here that he is the epitome of absolutism, mostly because when we look back at the era of absolutism, most people are going to point the finger at Louis XIV. And a lot of that is due to the fact that he built what he built. And you guys all researched the Palace of Versailles already, and you're familiar with that. So Louis XIV takes over the kingdom at the young age of 5. He is assisted by Jules Mazarin. And he grows up living the life of a king, and he is going to continue and build upon that and live a life almost like no other. I would not say that he is up to the level of Solomon of the Old Testament, but he did live very, very well. And if you look through the palace at Versailles and you think about how well Louis XIV lived, and then keep in mind that pales in comparison to Solomon. And the fact that Solomon is the wealthiest man that has ever lived, and his palaces were that much grander and greater than even what we can see from Louis XIV, just makes you step back and go, wow, man, God is awesome. And Solomon was pretty powerful as well. But we're talking about Louis today. So he is famous for this statement of one king, one law, one faith. What do you think he is trying to emphasize in this statement? Absolutism, yes. Okay, let's just say for a moment, let's put it into today's terms, and please put aside your own personal opinions here. This is not a personal attack. But if we were to see, if I were to put up here on this wall a picture of our current president, and we were to have this phrase above his head, one king, or let's switch the word king, let's say one president, one law, one faith. What do you think that would mean that he is trying to promote in this country? Dictatorship, okay? What else comes to your mind when you think about that in the context of our world today? A loss of freedom, perhaps that as well. Haley? Okay. Okay. Think about it this way too. If this were to be a commercial at the Super Bowl or commercial on Netflix, and it said, "How about we change this? One America." What? Yeah, there are commercials, aren't there? No, I'm thinking. Yeah. Okay. One America, one law, one faith. How does that change your viewpoint? Justin, what do you think? We switch the word king to America. One America, one law, one faith. Okay, we are a country of diversity, so what do you think this is trying to promote if we were to put it in that context? Okay. Yeah, we could go that route. Victoria, what do you think?
If it was one America, it would be more unified. If it was just one king, then it would be like he's rolling over them, but it's not like really unified as a country, I guess.
Okay. If we're looking at the king statement, yeah, I think that would be true too. Yeah.
It kind of, when you compare the two, if you're looking at the one president, Americans are very self-centered, and so it makes them, with that stamp of the one president, it would make them think, well, why aren't we included in that, blah, blah, blah. But if it says one America, then it makes them feel patriotic.
Okay.
They're included in that same.
And I think you're hitting on something here. If it's all about the president, if it's one president, one law, one faith, everybody bristles at that. Like, well, that's all about him, and that's all about one individual. We feel like we are really small in that. But if we include America, if we say one America, one law, one faith, doesn't that sound like a somebody's really a really nice poster slogan of something that promotes unity?
Sure, but they can't count because there's no counts out.
Okay, well, yeah. What else do you think? Okay, let me know if you think of it. So I look at that, and I think, okay, we look at absolutism, we think, yeah, really not a good thing, not a way of life we want to be under. But I think if we substitute that one word, one America, one law, one faith, everybody's like, hey, yeah, we're all in this together. Okay, oh, there we go. Yeah, what if you don't believe in that faith? What if you don't agree with that? Now, is America trying to promote unity today? Yeah, I would say we may not be doing a great job with it, but there are a lot of people promoting the idea of unity, and we don't want to go riot in the street because of hatred toward one another. We want to embrace each other's differences. We want to be a unified country. That's true. What about faith? Do we have diversity of religious beliefs in this country? Are we accepting of other faiths and beliefs in this country?
No, sir, ours is true. Theirs is not.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't be accepting of the people.
Okay, well, let's
He didn't say the people, he said the faith.
let's think about this from a America standpoint, not necessarily from a personal you as a Christian believer here. In America, are we tolerant of other faiths? Okay? We say we are. Are we?
It's the law, but there is a lot of discrimination and hatred.
There is. Okay. Rochelle, I see you shaking your head no. Why do you say no?
Because some people, they're people of one religion would not talk to another person of another
Okay.
religion just because it's their religion.
Okay.
So they just wouldn't talk to them.
So there's not going to be any unity among them, if I understand you correctly. There could be potential conflict, maybe even some arguing and fighting between them because of their differences. You guys okay back there? Yeah. Okay. Seems like you're researching something that may not be dealing with what we're talking about.
We're just laughing at this one king, one law, one faith.
It's just so goofy. Okay. Haley?
What was the question again?
Oh, we were talking through this idea of, is America really
No.
tolerant of other faiths? Okay, why not?
Because in our is it the Constitution that says something says religious freedom.
Yeah,
And
Amendment 1.
when they promote religious freedom all the time, but if today, if someone decides that I'm not going to bake a cake for this person because they are homosexual couple and they're getting married, those people can sue them, and that's pretty much taking advantage of their.
Okay,
That's one
I
situation.
understand what you're.
It is one situation.
I understand what you're
It
saying,
happens all
but
the time.
we're stepping into another issue that is broadening our conversation. I want to keep it narrowed here. Are we tolerant of other religious views?
I think we are, because it's not like we're saying Muslims can't come to the U.S. or something like that. In general, we tolerate other religions and things like that, and people are open to pray in the streets and things like that, or whatever. But there is a lot of hate crimes that go on, and that's what Haley was talking about, and that's individual situations.
So that's not a
That's not us as a country.
Okay. Last comment here, and then I'm gonna move on. Tori?
So I was gonna say how as a country, at least a lot in the government, it's all about being your own god. I believe what I believe in, that's what's true. When in reality, you can't. I know Mr. Hoising always asks what is truth. You know? So that's basically going against that.
Okay.
And then with the Muslim population, they're I think we tolerate them, but by what the media says, sometimes that can get in the way and we
Yeah.
can judge them too quickly. But so I think I'm kind of with Joelle, there's small problems, but in all reality, we try our best, but we probably
Okay.
could
So here's where I want to jump to this, because we could continue down this rabbit trail for a long time, and not necessarily the focus I want to go with today. But I want you to think through. Here's Louis' viewpoint. Okay, he understands how divisive religion can be among people. He has seen what his dad went through in the 30 Years' War, and we saw that video on how that religious war sparked from one section and ended up spreading throughout most of Europe. It went through the Netherlands, it went through Spain, it went through France, it went through England. It went through all these different places because people couldn't agree on a religious view. And I think when we look at the United States today, we do have Amendment number 1 that talks about religious freedom and how many of our religious rights are protected. And there are cases where people are discriminated against based off of their religious viewpoint. We're not going to go down that path here, but in general, we are tolerant from a political standpoint, officially in our Constitution, but yet in practice, I think there is some division, diversity. There are times where there's conflict and it leads to hatred, it leads toward sometimes violence going on there. Louis saw the potential for that. And so I think that's what he was trying to accomplish in this, is he said, okay, I'm your king. You got one guy to make the decisions. So you need to look to me as the example. You need to look to me as the one who's going to make the choices for this country. One law. So we're not going to have a separate law for the wealthy as to the commoners. We're going to have everybody under the same law, a unified law system, and I make the rules. Okay, that's Louis' perspective, is that I make the rules. Does he have to follow the rules? Not if he makes the rules, no. He doesn't necessarily have to. But unless you can overthrow him, he gets to make that choice. So everybody's under the same amount of laws. That includes the nobility, that includes the poor middle class. Everybody has to follow the same rules. And then one faith. It's just going to eliminate a lot of problems if we have one religious view from the country's standpoint. So everybody is going to be Catholic, and we're just going to be over and done with it. All the Protestants, you're welcome to leave if you don't like that, but we are going to just have one faith. That's it. Anybody against it is violating the law, and therefore you are subject to the government's punishment. He thought that that would simplify things, and he thought that would make less controversy and less problems, because there was a clear dividing line of who is right, who is wrong, based off of his rules. Now, of course, not everybody is going to agree with his rules, but he said, I'm the state. So I am the one who makes the decisions. If you have a problem with that, then you try to overthrow me. If you can overthrow me, or he didn't actually say that. He didn't want to invite people to try and overthrow him. But that's the way that it plays out, is that if you don't like what somebody like this says, the only thing you can do is try to take their power away from them. And Louis had enough protectors around him to keep him in power. Some of you guys talked about the nobility. What was some of the things that he did to keep them happy?
He centralized them all in the same area and like had parties and stuff like that.
He made life good for the nobility. So if you are part of the wealthy class and he is making your life good and you're getting invited to all these lavish parties and you are getting land and you're getting money and you're getting all kinds of stuff from Louis, do you have any incentive to dethrone him? No. Now, who controls the armies? Louis controls some of them, but on a practical level, who else has control over them?
The nobility.
Nobility. So nobility is the one who they have armies that help follow them, or that follow them and help support them. So if he keeps nobility happy and keeps them on his side, then he controls the army and nobody can overthrow him. So he didn't have to raise a massive military to protect himself. He did it through negotiating with the nobility. It's a pretty smart move. In his leadership council, he appointed Jean-Baptiste Colbert as his primary financial advisor. He was his right-hand man when it came to financial issues. Okay, I wouldn't say that he was like second in command by any means, but he made a lot of financial decisions for the king. So he was appointed chief minister of finance because the economy in France was struggling, and Louis could not figure this out on his own. For some reason, he didn't understand the fact that I'm spending money on my palace, and therefore the country has no money. I don't know where it's all going. I don't know why we don't have any money. So he brings in Colbert. He said, here, figure this thing out. Help us make money in our country. And Colbert does it. Colbert does a good job of figuring out ways to move tax money, figuring out ways to generate more money for the government, and he turns France's finances around, and because of that, the nobility profit, and the nobility then are singing the praises of Louis XIV, and they're very excited about the direction of where things are going. So associate him with finances. Louis puts himself in direct control of the army. This was not uncommon for many of the kings at this point to do so, but he had no military experience. And I'm not trying to be super funny here, but that would be like me becoming President Trump's Secretary of Defense. I mean, I've studied history, so I know a little bit there, but I lose when I play the game of Risk. So I don't think you want me manipulating our army and moving our navies around the world. You want somebody with a whole lot more experience. That's kind of the same thing here that Louis XIV. He has grown up in a palace. He has no military background, no military training, and yet he's going to control the army. It doesn't sound very good, but he does make this smart move where he appoints lieutenants beneath him that do know what they're doing to then have some advising powers to tell him, here's what I think you should do. And he would listen to his subordinates, listen to those lieutenants. So essentially, he was in control. He was calling the shots, but he would go to his lieutenants and say, hey, what do you think we should do over here? It was like a cabinet, yeah, a military cabinet. But he had the power to overrule them and to make a decision that he thought necessary. So in that way, I do give him credit there, and I think that was a smart move for him to put people around him that were better knowledgeable. Now, here's where he begins to get rid of the Protestants. In 1685, he revokes the Edict of Nantes.
Is that where like all the Huguenots can stay safe?
Yes. That was the edict or the law that allowed the Protestants to stay and have religious freedom in a certain portion of France. By 1685, Louis is tired of the division between the Protestants and the Catholics, and he says, it's time for this law to go away. So he viewed the Protestants as a threat to his power, and he was afraid that they were going to revolt against him. Yes, ma'am? It was what protected the Huguenots, or the Huguenots or the Protestants in France. It was issued back by Henry IV. I can't remember the year, but it's been on the books for a couple hundred years from what I'm thinking here. So think of it a little bit like our First Amendment, the religious freedom. It would be like we have a president that comes in and says, we're going to get rid of the religious freedom part of Amendment number 1. And so no longer do we have religious freedom in our country. That's what happened here for the Protestants. So they have two choices. You can either live there and take your chances of being persecuted by the government, or you can leave. And most of them leave. So when they decide to leave, most of these Protestants, these were the best workers in their country. These guys owned businesses. These were advisors to the king. Many of them were nobility. And so because of all of that, when they leave, when they pick up and leave, France loses a huge part of their economy, which that also means that Louis misses out on a lot of taxes.
Is this where their economy crashes?
It starts to decline because of that, but it does decline somewhat. Let's see if I can get us reconnected here.
I'm going to watch it every single episode.
I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here on the life of Versailles. you guys have already researched that in your previous homework. So we are going to move on here. That is the same video that, or one of the videos that you had the opportunity to watch in your homework too. So Louis XIV dies, and he leaves the throne here to Louis XV.
These people need new names. Seriously.
Well, it's a tradition thing where
I can't read Roman numerals, so I just memorize it by the letters. So I just go
Louis XV.
XIV.
Yeah. Now, Louis XV was actually the great-grandson of Louis XIV. By the way, Louis XIV outlives his own son and grandson. So, yeah, Louis XIV lives for a very, very long time. And so Louis XV is actually his great-grandson, because Louis XIV's son dies before he can take over the throne. He dies fairly old. He lived a long life. And then his Louis XIV's grandson also died. No, he didn't raise his, no. No, they lived in the palace, but he wasn't like a father to him necessarily. So Louis XV is fairly young. I don't remember the age, but he is the great-grandson there. Yes? Mm-hmm. I think that was Louis XV. Okay, a couple things here about other countries besides France. If you need to move up closer, you can. So I'm going to pull out 3 other countries where we see absolutism happening in the rest of Europe besides France. France is like the poster child for it, but we also see it happening here in Prussia. So the nobility in Prussia are called Junkers, or I think it might be Junkers. They are ones who worked along with the electors here to govern the country. And they have Frederick William I, who becomes their king. So originally the idea of their government was that they would have nobility, and the most powerful man in the nobility would kind of rule over everybody else. Well, Frederick William comes to power, and he was a soldier at one point, took over as king. Because of his background as a war-fighting soldier, he was very vulgar, not a very kind man to the people around him. People did not like him very much because of that. And during his time as ruler of Prussia, he said this: "Salvation belongs to the Lord, but all else belongs to me." Again, another one of those first-hand accounts of he's an absolute ruler. He believes that he is the most powerful, and really he was for that territory. During the course of his reign, he established absolutism in Prussia. And because of his background in the military, he develops one of the strongest armies in the entire world at this point of history. So you should associate Frederick William with strong army. I believe so. I don't have that in my notes here, but I believe they were Catholic. Right. So if they were not Catholic and he opened it up to Protestantism, then that would just, for him, be a non-issue, that he was okay with people worshiping and having their own faith. I don't know off the top of my head, but I believe that they were Catholic. Right, right. Now let's move on to Austria. In Austria, we have the ruling family is known as the Habsburg family. We talked about them in geography last year, a little bit. So the Habsburg family, they struggled here to gain absolute power like they saw happening in Prussia and France. So as much as they tried to gain more and more power over their people, it really was not happening. Because of the fact that the Catholic Church had such great ties to Austria, the people were still looking to the Catholic Church as more of a leadership than the Habsburg family ever was to them. So the Catholic Church had a lot of power there. Many of the neighbors around Austria, other countries, were very greedy and kept picking wars with them and picking on them there. And there was no unity within the country. So for the Habsburg family to try to get everybody to agree that they were the leaders and for them to get the nobility on their side was really, really tough. So therefore, the Habsburgs struggled in this whole idea. Joseph II here, he was a Habsburg. And he tried to establish absolutism and consciously tried to divert the people from Catholicism toward a respect and loyalty to him as the king. He was the closest of anybody here in Austria to establishing absolutism. But we would say that of all these countries, they were down way on the low end of the rankings for absolute countries. Yes? Yep. So Joseph II was the closest anyone would be there. Yeah. In Russia, I know last year in geography we talked about Ivan the Terrible, or Ivan the Fourth. You thought that Louis was young when he took over as king at the age of 5. Ivan the Terrible, or let's call him Ivan the Fourth. Terrible's not a good name. It's pretty terrible. He was only 3 when his mother died. He was 3 years old, and he became the heir to the throne. And he had a number of people who were set in charge to help him rule. They were called regents, and these regents were advisors to him. They were supposed to bring him up, train him, and teach him. But in reality, what they did is they locked him in a room to protect him, to make sure that nobody killed him. So they locked him up in a room, and they only came and talked to him when they needed to do some training or when they needed to get something from him. And so he spent most of his childhood and his early years of life in isolation.
How old was he when they let him out?
He's living in a kingdom of isolation.
Looks like he's the king.
Yeah. Thanks for going there. That was great.
Hey, in
When-
the summer where it's cold.
When he turned 16, he now was old enough to run the throne on his own. So from the age of... No. This is later.
Mr. Jones, where's Jan Stonewall and Son?
They have other things they're doing right now. Yep. So,
Switch out of this class?
not right now. No.
Okay.
The age of 3 to 16, he was primarily on his own, literally isolated in a tower. And so... So he did not have a whole lot of social skills, which is not a good thing when you are ruling a country. So there was perhaps a lot of bitterness and anger built up in him as well for the way that he was treated. So when he was 16 years old, he established the title of Tsar. I do know that we talked about that in geography. C-Z-A-R.
Oh, he made that title?
He was the first one to be called Tsar, and he kind of created that himself because he wanted to be like Caesar.
Wow.
So, Ivan the Terrible,
What about a follower?
We got an admirer.
he was a very cruel leader, and he was so paranoid that people were after him that he even killed his own son in order to make sure that his son did not take the throne from him prematurely. And
Like baby son?
no, not baby son. I don't remember how old his son was, but old enough that he felt justified to be able to kill him where he was a threat to the throne. So he ruled his throne by fear. other people feared him, so therefore they would not attack him. And by the time he is dead and gone, there is a major uprising and revolt because of the fact that now there's no heir to the throne. It just is an open kingdom, and whoever can establish the most power takes over. That leads here to the Romanov dynasty. And this dynasty here, they're going to bring Russia into what we know more of as absolutism. Now, Ivan, we would call him an absolute ruler, but he didn't really care about the people quite as much as the Romanov family will. So in the Romanov family, there are a couple names you'll probably recognize. The first one is Peter the Great. From geography last year, anybody remember what Peter the Great did, or one of the two major accomplishments that he had?
Petersburg,
He did. Where was St. Petersburg?
in Russia.
Where in Russia? What was it close to?
The North Coast.
It was along, I wouldn't say north, but yeah, it is on the west.
What's the capital of Russia?
Today it's Moscow. Okay, here's Moscow. Here's Moscow right here. Here is St. Petersburg. Okay, what is close to St. Petersburg up here?
Moscow, that one place. Water.
Yes, water. Why is water important for a major city? Trade, yes. So Peter the Great establishes a new capital city at St. Petersburg in order to be able to more effectively trade with other countries. That also led Russia into Westernization. He tried to bring Russia into a more modern age, trying to embrace other ideas from around Europe. So those are the two big things you need to remember for Peter the Great. He moved the capital city to St. Petersburg so it'd be closer to trade and shipping routes, and he began to westernize much of Russia. After Peter the Great, we have Catherine the Great. She was a woman. Yep. Now, she modeled her reign a little more after Ivan than Peter. Peter was known as a little bit more gracious and concerning of the people. Catherine, not so much. She had her own husband murdered, and she put the people under very harsh and cruel authority. She was known as a pretty intense leader.
Maybe she had a bad child. Why did she have her husband killed?
She wanted the power. She did not want him to have it. So there it was.
Why are they so angry then?
Well, because of the fact that she ruled the people very strongly, and she did a lot that helped Russia become more modern and more powerful. So they were known as a great leader, not necessarily because the people liked them, but because they did so much for the advancement of their country. She ruled very harshly, but she also advanced the people in Russia. Now, let's move here to England. This is our last topic today. We've talked about 3 areas, actually 4 if we include France, where absolutism has been successful. So, Emily, give me one of those countries where absolutism was successful. France being one of them. Justin, give me another one.
Let's see here. England.
No. Where else? Julie. We said France already.
Russia?
Russia, yes. Okay, Victoria, give me another one. We talked about 4 countries today with absolutism, or characteristics of absolutism. So France already. We said Russia. There's 2 more. No, England did not. Kaylin, give me another one. Rochelle? Got 2 left.
China.
No.
Korea.
Prussia's another one. So, who's our last one? Austria. There we go. Now we got him. Joseph II was close. The closest one there. Okay, can we please come in the room?
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, we're going to go to England here. Talk about James I.
Wait, what were the two? What four countries? Russia, France.
Russia, France, Prussia, and Austria. Prussia. Yeah.
Russia with the P in front.
Yeah. Not anymore today. It's
What is it today?
Germany,
Oh.
German territory today. Yeah.
Is it still called Russia?
No. Now, James I. You guys remember back when we talked about Elizabeth?
Yes.
Everybody loved Elizabeth because she was the girl who did what to Philip?
Kill them.
No. No.
She refused to marry him.
Refused to marry him, yeah.
Trying to kill her.
And what major event was she successful over Philip in 1588?
Spanish Armada.
Spanish Armada, yes. That is the same Elizabeth that we're talking about here. Elizabeth, who did Elizabeth marry?
No one.
Nobody. She married herself to the throne. So therefore, could she have a line of children to the throne? No. So when she died, they had to go back and they had to find the next closest blood relative. It was her cousin, James. So James I becomes the next king of England. And he was...
That's Elizabeth I.
Yeah, it was Elizabeth I, yes. 1611, this is the same guy for whom the King James Bible is named. So in this particular year, there were a number of Protestants that were working on an English translation of the Bible, and they wanted to make sure that their work was going to be recognized by the government. Now, James also had some motivation to be involved in that whole translation, and so he oversaw or had people watch over and make sure that that translation was done correctly. And he was a supporter of Protestantism in England. Well, not everybody was happy about that. They were not in support of Elizabeth and her ideas of Protestantism. Remember, we talked about the Elizabethan settlement that compromised between Catholic and Protestant. There were still a number of Catholics. There were a lot of Catholics who were very upset about what Elizabeth had done. They thought when Elizabeth died that they would be able to put a Catholic king on the throne. Well, that didn't happen because of their rules, and so James comes in and he is going to very strongly promote the idea of Protestantism through the 1611 translation of Scriptures. Now, through the way that he treated some of the Protestants, there were a number of separatists that chose to leave. Well, because of the fact that he was supporting Protestantism through the Anglican Church. Now, when we talked about the Anglican Church under the Elizabethan settlement, what was the difference between a separatist and a Puritan? Separatists wanted to separate. Why?
Because they were going to do things a little differently, but they
There is
didn't
no
think
way
that
of
they needed
fixing
to
it.
start over from scratch. But Puritans were like, no, we don't want anything to do with it. We need to... Wait.
You're
Right.
flipping.
There's another way.
Yeah, you're flipping
Okay,
around.
So Puritans were like, oh, well, we don't have to like cut everything off. We just need to go through and make everything
Yep.
good again.
Yep.
And the separatists were like, no, we just need to start from scratch again.
Yep. Okay, so the separatists wanted to separate from the Anglican Church because they believed it was too close to Catholic doctrine. So King James comes in, and while he supported Protestantism, he still supported the Anglican Church. And the separatists, therefore, believed that there was no hope, no saving the church. We need to separate. So where did they go?
Nowhere else.
Before they go there,
Holland.
they go to Holland. Holland was known for its religious freedom, thanks to William of Orange, yes, and Elizabeth, who had helped to keep Philip out of, and Spain out of the Netherlands. So they go there first. Then when they find out that they don't want their kids growing up Dutch,
Why would they want their kids growing up Dutch?
they wanted to preserve their own English culture.
The Dutch people. I'm just kidding.
Having you?
No.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So King James is not necessarily the most popular man in England. Many people don't view him as the rightful king, and so there are some that want to get rid of him.
So why is the Bible
because of
Because he supported it.
the way that he supported it in the Anglican Church and wanted to see it promoted. Okay?
I was
Now,
talking to the people, not you.
this is Charles. We're going to get to Charles here when we come back from break. Here's my question for you. And here's what you're going to spend the last 10 minutes beginning to work on and submit by the time we come back next Tuesday. Well, a week from Tuesday. There was a plot to assassinate James I. It was called the Gunpowder Plot of 1605. So I want you to do a little bit of digging using two non-Wikipedia sources to find out what was this event all about. Find out some of the details, who was involved, why they planned this assassination attempt. And I want you to put it together into a couple of paragraphs, and I would like for you to tell me what happened and who was involved. Then I want you to think about a follow-up question in a separate paragraph, and I want you to explain to me or tell me how might have history changed if that event had turned out differently. So that is your homework task. That is what you need to be doing some digging and research on. That question is in the Canvas assignment in case you are not able to write it down now. So you're going to need to consult some outside sources, but I don't want you using the Wikipedia as your source. You do need to make sure that you include and tell me where you got your information from that is non-Wikipedia sourcing. I don't necessarily need quotations from your source. You can if you'd like to, yes, but I'm not requiring that. I just want you to make sure that you are consulting two different places so that you don't accidentally pull up Betty Lou's senior thesis from her English class in 1988 that she put together at 3:30 in the morning, and using that as your source. So I want you doing some comparison of two different sources and making sure that they are accurate together. Okay?
Is it the James first?
Yes, it is the